Good morning. I'm Meredith Barber, and I'm the interim minister here at Horizon. We're excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, whether you're here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here among us. I'd now like to invite Carolyn Moore forward for an announcement about our congregational meeting.
Good morning. So we have our mid-year meeting today after the service. We'll be starting the meeting at 11:45. Please make sure that you sign the member list or check it off. I think it's out in the lobby so that we know we have a quorum after this service. Then as quickly as possible, get some food, get your kiddos some food, drop them at childcare, and then come back into the sanctuary to eat and listen to the meeting as you eat. So that's it.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of Reverend Karen Johnston. We, Unitarian Universalists, who have long been known to be a bit too much in our heads, have been moving towards a more authentic recognition of our bodies, a more genuine relationship with our bodies and in our bodies. Hallelujah and blessed be. These bodies are home. These bodies are being. These bodies without which we can neither have inherent worth nor recognize it in others. These bodies without which we cannot experience the interdependent web of all existence, for it is through our bodies that we are part of the self-same web. Let us pledge ourselves, the whole of ourselves, to the great collective liberation of all bodies. Let us pledge ourselves, the whole of ourselves, to inhabit these bodies, to honor these bodies, to celebrate these bodies, to defend these bodies. Come, let us worship together.
Our chalice lighting words today come to us from Reverend Elizabeth Strong. She writes, "Seek for the spirit of life that is within you, that you might know more fully its power and strength. Seek for the spirit of life that surrounds you, that you might know more fully its connection to you. Seek for the spirit of life that is within others, that you might enter more fully into the community that embraces us, this day and every day." I invite you to join me now in saying together our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of our church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth, thus do we covenant together. I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join together in singing our opening hymn, Here We Have Gathered.
May all who see If you have brought donations for MetroCrest services, whom we partner with to help in the local community, would you please pass them down to the aisle? Because young people are just about to come on down, and they're going to go ahead and put the donations over here. So if you are young or young at heart, I invite you to come up here for a time for all ages with Reverend Meredith and me.
So today in our worship service, I'm going to be talking to the grown-ups a little bit about choices and the different kinds of choices we can make about our bodies. And so Lauren and I are going to share a little bit about that with you too.
Yes, so each of us lives in a body, right? And your body belongs to you. Your head belongs to you, your hands belong to you, your feet belong to you, and your arms, and no one else can tell you what to do with your body. And this is what grown-ups call bodily autonomy. And this is where something called consent really becomes important, and we're going to tell you what consent is.
So one thing that I have noticed is that everybody is really different in terms of what they're comfortable with. So like some people might really like hugs and some people don't like them at all. Some other people might like a handshake or a high five or even like no bodies touching at all.
Yeah, and so would it be okay for someone who really likes hugs to just go up to people and hug them? What do you all think? Oh, I see a lot of shaking of heads, yeah. And yeah, you're right, that's not okay. They'll need consent. And consent is that they need people to say it's okay for other people to hug them. And how do we get consent? Well, we just ask.
So I'm going to practice this right now. So Lauren, can I give you a hug?
Yes, I really need a hug this morning. Thank you. That was very nice. I appreciate you asking.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know. And friends, if Lauren doesn't say yes, she has not given her consent. So sometimes adults might tell us things like, to give a family member a hug or something like that, even when you don't want to. But kids still get to decide because it's their body.
And so here at Horizon and other UU churches, we offer a program called Our Whole Lives. It's the class you take at different times between when you're a kindergartner and you're a 12th grader, and you learn about sexuality. Who here has been through an OWL class, just out of curiosity?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
wow,
there's a lot
lots
of us.
of people,
Yes,
that's
exactly,
awesome.
Exactly. In fact, today, the high school OWL class starts. It's a pretty exciting day today. And so in OWL, we talk about what this asking permission, this consent. And we also talk about our bodies and having relationships with other people.
So thank you guys for listening, and now we'll sing you to your classes.
We are shaded by trees planted by those generations before. Today we give to sustain the future ministries of the church. The offering will now be joyfully given and received. Thank you. That was beautiful. Our first reading comes to us from the writings of Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker. She writes, "Why does it matter that women's reproductive choices be protected? Because we live in a broken world where life is at risk in many ways. The power to choose is the power of life in the midst of brokenness. Without choice, tragedy, impasse, and despair are the last word. With choice, creativity, responsibility, and possibility enter the conversation. With choice, human beings enter into fuller personhood, becoming creative agents in the world who can transform life in the direction of greater justice, safety, and joy. A society in which human beings accept that life and death are in their hands is a better society." Embracing creativity and responsibility is a spiritual value that applies beyond the questions of pregnancy and childbirth. To know that we have choice is to know that life is not predetermined, that we do not simply have to comply with established structures, rote patterns, or the dictates of despair. It is to know that we are not helpless in the face of overwhelming events. We all need the spiritual knowledge that life and death are in our hands, and we all need to do the hard work of ethical discernment, of accepting that life and death are ours to choose. Why should we march to keep abortion safe and legal? Because when there is choice, there is life. When there is life, there is hope. And when there is hope, we find ourselves holding bundles of joy in our arms. Each of us bears in our bodies, in our own bodies, the powers of holding on and of letting go.
We come now to the time in our worship service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. We'll share a time of silence, hear the joys and sorrows of our community, hear a written prayer, and join in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. I invite you to join me now in a time of silence. Today we join in sorrow at those killed leaving a Lunar New Year celebration last night. We rage, wondering when we will know an end to gun violence. And for all other joys and sorrows known only in the quiets of our hearts, we hold them here. Words of our prayer this morning come from the Reverend Lisa Bovey Kemper, and this is a body blessing. So I invite you to touch hands to your own forehead if it feels natural. May you be blessed with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. May your intellect take you far on your journey. You have been blessed with reason and free will. It is your call every day to use these gifts. I invite you to touch your hand to your throat. May you be blessed with voice. May you learn the complex nature of truth-telling. The ability to speak the truth in love is something that requires honesty, empathy, and care. You are challenged every day to seek the joy that comes with sharing your truth compassionately, as well as listening to others. I invite you to touch your hands to your heart. May your heart be full and blessed with love. May you know the agony of heartbreak as it is intertwined with the elation of true love. Your heart is a strong and resilient organ, one that will be with you until the end of your time on earth. May you heed the wisdom of your heart and always trust the truth it tells. I invite you to put your hands on your belly, your abdomen. You are blessed with the gift of sexuality. May you always remember that you are a beloved child of the universe. Your body is sacred and belongs to you alone. May you live into the full expression of your identity as a human being, embracing your true sexual and gender identity. The gift of sexuality brings with it many rewards as well as great responsibility. May you always retain power over your own being, striving toward mutually fulfilling and just relationship. I invite you to hold out your hands. When you were a baby, your tiny hands were your first contact with the world. Before you could see more than a few feet in front of your face, you grasped the finger of your loved ones. You catch yourself with hands when you fall, and you express love and comfort to others with them too. May your hands be gentle and strong. May you use them to carry light into the world and rest to the weary. May your hands always find the place of greatest need, beginning with your own. And may the Creator of all things hold you in the palm of her hand, wherever you go. I invite you to wrap your arms around your whole body. May you be blessed on your journey. May you remember that growth happens on the journey and that you are never alone. May you remember that you are a whole person, that each of these parts work together. We offer blessings upon you, body, mind, and spirit. May you be guided by compassion and truth, justice and love. May you find rest on the journey, always remembering where you came from, being mindful that your ancestors stand behind you, whether we are present on earth or have gone back to the soul of the world. May you be blessed in all things and carry blessings wherever you go. May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to join together in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. again. Our second reading this morning is called The Right to Choose, and it comes to us from the writings of the Reverend Elizabeth Mount. They write, "To begin, to start, to create, to undertake, to grow, to promise, to increase, to generate. All these are our birthright. As we are created, so may we create. The ability and the choice to create is sacred. To withdraw that chance from any person without their permission would be a violent act, the cutting off of life itself. And yet, as precious is the right to simply not, to end, to terminate, to stop, to discontinue, to rest, to hibernate, to impede, to prevent. Those two are our birthright. For without consent, our ability to create becomes not a blessing, but a burden and an imposition. Without space for a no, there can be no trustworthy yes. Today, we come into this holy place and time, ready to invoke the divine, to make space for the sacred, to co-create community once again. And this too is a choice. You may not be coerced into relationship with the holy or with one another. I invite you, I ask you to join us. I respect it if you will not today or ever. More sacred than any other individual need is choice, the right to know oneself, the right to know what you are ready for, what you need, to stretch when you can, to pause when you will, to know your body, your mind, and your spirit better than anyone else, and ultimately to be trusted with the responsibility of your own living." Here ends the reading. So on the days when I'm in Shreveport, I work out at our local Y, which is about a 10-minute drive from our house. And on the way is a clinic, Hope Clinic for Women, I think it's called. It has a big sign that says Hope out in front. And this is one of, I think, 4 places in Louisiana where you could get an abortion. I've noticed protesters in front of the clinic off and on since we bought our house in 2020. And last summer, I think in early June, because news of the Dobbs decision had already leaked, I was driving by. And I saw this young man, probably not quite 18, carrying a wooden cross, holding it up and kind of engaging the cars as they drove by. And I just felt this overwhelming rage, hot in the pit of my stomach, bubbling up from inside me, until I just screamed into the silence of my car, attempting to release the anger and the sadness and the fear. Because how dare he? How dare this man boy stand here, literally shaking a cross at people, coming to the only place where they could access life-giving and life-saving care in their last few weeks to do so? How dare the people who brought him into the world, who loved him, teach him so little about the realities of this world he lives in that he believes this is helpful? How dare he stand on the street waving a cross in judgment when not a mile down the road from him there are mothers struggling to pay for groceries to feed their children? Truly, what would Jesus do? Not that. Definitely not that. So the irony of living in this country sometimes is enough to break your heart. So today would have been the 50th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision, and today, for so many reasons, we need to talk about abortion. This past June, when the Dobbs ruling was officially handed down, I was at General Assembly, already away from the pulpit, and so we did not communally lament the way we needed to, the way that I wanted to. But I heard from some of you still about your distress, sharing your stories and sharing your anger, wondering what would happen if you walked the same path in today's world. Abortion and decisions around reproduction and healthcare can be incredibly hard to talk about, I think because it involves some of the most intimate details of our lives and some of our most personal decisions. It's nestled right up close to the heart. And our culture has done an excellent job of keeping us silent, afraid to speak up, afraid to share our own stories. But we all love someone who has had an abortion, who will need an abortion. There are so many complex feelings that we may not know what to do with. Those who have been around longer than me may remember a time before 1973, may have friends and loved ones who did what had to be done to survive. And we know that many people who sought access to abortions before they were legal, many poor women, women of color, died because they did not have access to the health care they needed, because they were desperate to get out of a situation they did not want to be in. And we know, too, that making abortion illegal does not make it stop. People who have means will still be able to get abortions, and people who do not will still seek care. It is safety that is left up to chance. Our culture still shies away from discussing reproductive issues because it's uncomfortable. It can sometimes be seen as shameful. It's personal and vulnerable. And our focus cannot be on changing the hearts and minds of people somewhere else, because each one of us, too, are products of this culture. And as such, each one of us has some healing to do. Our culture has made these things hard to talk about and has caused us to really suppress our emotional and spiritual needs around sexual and reproductive experiences. And the only way we can challenge that narrative and that stigma is to invite sharing. And I need you all to know that I am here to listen to whatever story you may have to share. The goal of opening this conversation is not so that everyone can agree and be on the same page. I do not assume that just because we are in a Unitarian Universalist congregation that we all agree on this issue. The question really is not, should abortion be a protected constitutional right, but who should decide? The Reverend Joan Javier Duval writes, "As a Unitarian Universalist minister, my faith loudly declares that life is sacred and that all people, including and especially those whose bodies can carry pregnancies, have sacred and holy agency and sovereignty over their bodies. My faith, and I know other faith traditions do as well, loudly declares that all people have the inherent right to make ethical and moral decisions about their bodies, as painful as these decisions are at times. I believe, and my faith asserts, that the direct personal experience of our own lives is a sacred source of authority in choosing our own path and our future. To use religious dogma that proclaims the sanctity of life as a guise for restricting personal agency and legislating other people's bodies is bad theology. It is bad theology to claim a concern for the sanctity of life on the one hand, while ignoring children dying at the border, trans women murdered on the streets, the continued defunding of public education, and fossil fuel-induced ecological catastrophe on the other. We all want freedom. The freedom to live and love without fear or condemnation. The freedom to be well and whole in body, mind, and spirit. The freedom to flourish in the brief but grace-filled lives we are so blessed to have on this precious earth. Our reproductive freedom is a necessary part of the wellness and flourishing that we all desire and that we all deserve. If you've been engaging with this issue for a while, you've probably heard the term reproductive justice, a term coined in 1994 by a group of 12 Black women, and the central tenets of which are the ideas central to all of our survival: the right to have children, the right to not have children, the right to parent the children you have in a safe and healthy environment, and the right to bodily autonomy. The focus on reproductive justice also includes things like food deserts, affordable housing, quality education, livable wages, safety net programs, reliable and safe transportation, climate change, freedom from state-based and domestic violence. The Reverend Darcy Roque writes about living in New Orleans and advocating for reproductive justice, and this is her story. She writes, "As my ministry in reproductive rights became more public, some clergy and faith organizations shunned me. Mainly, though, women of all faith traditions or no faith tradition at all took me aside to share their stories of reproductive health, some joyful, but most traumatic. Forced hysterectomies, waiting periods for abortion care causing job loss for financially struggling families, horrific complications due to hospital error." Roque goes on to share that the information she received from other women would go on to save her life when she suffered an ectopic pregnancy and was told continually to wait to be seen by a doctor, that her pain was no big deal. It was through their stories that she knew to advocate for herself when she was close to death. And it is stories like these that have me most fearful in our current reality. Will pregnant people still be given the care they might need when things go wrong? Do the people making these laws, most of whom will never have to understand the intricacies of this, understand that even wanted pregnancies can end tragically, dangerously? It doesn't seem like it. We have to remember, too, that this is larger than any one piece of legislation. As Monica Ray Simpson of Sister Song says, when we back up, this is about full-scale liberation. This is about our ability to move through the world and do what we must do. Reproductive justice makes this issue larger than just abortion, but puts choices, whichever ones we make, at the center. It puts abortion back in context, in the context in which we actually live. It puts us back on Kings Highway in Shreveport, where parents are struggling to feed the kids they already have, and no one is helping them. But we have people of faith more concerned with the unborn. And you may have heard this quote from Methodist pastor David Barnhart. He says, "The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated. Unlike the incarcerated, the addicted, or the chronically poor, they don't resent your condescension or complain that you are not politically correct. Unlike widows, they don't ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, or childcare. Unlike aliens, they don't bring all of that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they are born, you can forget about them because they cease to be the unborn. You can love the unborn without substantially challenging your own wealth, power, or privilege, without reimagining social structures, apologizing, or making reparations to anyone. They are, in short, the perfect people to love if you want to claim you love Jesus, but actually dislike people who breathe. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the poor, widows, orphans, all the groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they get thrown under the bus for the unborn. And this is about so much more than even that. Many may wrongly believe that the religious right movement in America formed in response to the legalization of abortion in America. And that's a narrative that its leaders have leaned into. Jerry Falwell even wrote, "I sat there staring at the Roe versus Wade story, growing more and more fearful of the consequences of the Supreme Court's act and wondering why so few voices had been raised against it. But the facts tell a different story." As writer Randall Balmer reminds us, it was not until 6 years after Roe that evangelical leaders seized on abortion, not for moral reasons, but as a rallying cry to deny President Jimmy Carter a second term. The anti-abortion crusade was more palatable than the religious right's real motive, protecting segregated schools. There will always be a racial justice angle to the story of abortion and reproductive justice. There has been from the very beginning of this country. Who has the right to bear children without being deemed unfit? Who has the right to actually raise their own children instead of other people's in a way that feels safe and supportive? This has always been something that white folks, for the most part, were guaranteed. And for others, it was otherwise. And though today evangelicals dominate the pro-life movement, that was, of course, not always the case. In the 1960s especially, abortion was considered a Catholic issue, and at the Southern Baptist Convention in 1971, just 2 years before the Supreme Court decision, a resolution was passed urging Southern Baptists to, quote, work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under conditions such as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained evidence of the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. And this position was upheld in 1974 and in 1976. So yes, the facts tell a very different story than what the religious right might want the public to believe about their desire to end abortion. The facts tell us that it was never really about abortion, but it was about control and fear and racism. It is about policing people's bodies. And it is important for us to recognize this distinction so that we can see when this is happening again. And it is also important because we might be tempted to say, yes, that's terrible. We would never do that here. How can we recognize when we're policing others and ourselves? And it comes down to choices. We might think to ourselves, well, I would never eat that, or they shouldn't be eating that, it's unhealthy, or they shouldn't do that with their kids, let them watch their iPad, let them cry. We've all thought things like that. Then it's the shoulds that get us. I would bet that they are most often directed, if we're honest with ourselves, to people of maybe a different background than us, a different socioeconomic status, a different life stage. Something for us to think about. For years, I have loved a podcast called Someone Knows Something. And it was one of the first investigative podcasts that really seemed to hold care for families who had suffered something tragic at the center of its work. David Ridgen, its host, has a very tender way of analyzing people and situations. It's very intuitive. And the most recent season was on abortion, specifically the murder of Dr. Barnett Slepian in New York State in the 90s, an OBGYN who performed abortions. He was shot in the kitchen of his home in front of his wife and children while preparing soup after the family had just returned home from synagogue services. And the story is heartbreaking and enraging. But the reason I listened to this podcast is that when interviewing the family, Ridgen opened the door for them to explain that Dr. Slepian was actually personally opposed to abortion. And he was a very conservative man. And he was not the only doctor who felt this way. But he believed that abortion was life-saving health care, that pregnant people needed access to, and that it was their choice to make. He saw providing this service as part of being an OBGYN. His job was not to judge, it was to be their doctor. So holding all of that, where do we go from here? I think it can be tempting to want to rush to action right away. We want to be of use, to make visible change. We want to know that all the advocacy we may have done throughout our lives has not been in vain. And I'm not sure we can have that, because whenever you open yourselves to organizing work, you open yourself to the unknown, to the fact that things may not go as planned. And we live in a state where so much is coming at us. It can feel like we barely have time to process one thing, but before the next horror is coming our way. But we also know that people have been doing this work for a very long time. Historically, many clergy who believed in choice as a key part of a person's life formed what was called the Clergy Support Network, where before abortion was legal, clergy helped people to get abortions at great personal risk because they believed it was the right thing to do. Abortion funds have been doing this work for a long time, assisting folks with access to the health care they need, knowing that if people face barriers to abortion access, there's usually more than one, be it the cost of the procedure, cost and finding of childcare, cost of transportation, lodging, maybe having a translator. They are aware of all of these intricacies. We also know that First Church here in Dallas, our neighbor, is helping people get access to this life-saving care. And that didn't come about overnight, but through long-standing relationships built over decades. It's always about the relationship. So more than anything, the purpose of today is a reminder of the conversation that we need to open between us, to tell our stories, to not let our culture of shame around these issues keep us silent anymore, and to share in this feeling of lament that has led us to this point, that some of us have worked tirelessly to avoid getting to this place of abortion networks and underground travel and hush whispers, and yet here we are in 2023. We have a right to be angry about that. We have a right to scream about that. We have a right to shed tears over this loss. And in the fall of 2021, when Texas enacted the 6-week abortion ban, before the Dobbs decision, a group of us from Horizon went to protest. And that morning, I was sitting there in my apartment, in my collar, with my piece of neon poster paper, thinking about what did I want my sign to say, about how I could put everything I felt about this issue into a little phrase that would fit on my poster board. And I took a minute to close my eyes and to breathe deep and to remember why I was doing this, why I felt called to show up that morning. And it came down to choice. The ability for people to decide for themselves, along with their doctors, the direction they wanted their lives to go. And to know that life experience, that direct experience, is something sacred, something holy. And so finally, I got out my permanent marker and began drawing the words, "Choice is holy." May we know it to be so. Amen. Wow. Let us rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn, "How Could Anyone?"
We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
So friends, I invite you to join hands if you're comfortable. And my prayer for you and for us all is to be able to make the choices that lead you to liberation, and that you help others to do the same. Go in peace.